Well, Tony Perkins is the president of the Family Research Council, and he joins David Brody and I now here on the Faith Nation set. Tony, thanks so much for being here with us.
Good to be with you.
Tony, a lot going on. Don't we say that every week with you?
I think every hour there's something new happening here in Washington.
We will tape every hour on the hour. The ministerial conference, really the first of its kind. You were there. Tell us what you experienced. And really, I think people really want to know, okay, great, a lot of speeches, the vice president, but what's the tangible outcome going forward?
Well, very significant. And ministerial is what happens when the Secretary of State calls his counterparts from around the world to come together to talk about something. It could be, the economy, it could be human rights, any number of issues. This is the first time we've ever had a Secretary of State that has called his peers, the foreign ministers, together to talk about religious freedom, to advance religious freedom. So yes, there were a number of discussions that took place, speeches. There was testimonies of those who have been abused, those who have lost their freedoms. But then it came down to yesterday, I was there as the Vice President spoke, pledging specific actions on behalf of the United States. One is a couple of new funds, one for genocide recovery, to help those areas that have been targeted for genocide. And this is monies going directly, not through the United Nations, not through difficult hoops, and then the International Religious Freedom Fund. That was one of the pledges, and prior to that, the Secretary of State said, this is going to be an annual event. So every year, there's going to be a summons to foreign leaders, and there were 84 there this week, to come together to talk about religious freedom. And then many of those nations yesterday pledged their own actions to advance religious freedom. So very, very significant.
Quick follow-up, Mick Mulvaney, tell us about this story, the budget director, something that you were surprised at that happened.
Well, I've known Mick, and he's a policy wonk when it comes to numbers, and he's been great at the Office of Budget and Management. But he actually kicked off the session on Monday, or on Tuesday rather, talking about religious freedom and how this administration is committed to it, and sharing a personal story of a situation he became aware of when he was in Rome, of something happened in Iraq, about how people getting a knock at their door, and if they can't pay a $500,000 tax, they either have to convert or they're killed, and their children, one by one, starting with the youngest, will be shot and killed in front of them. And he said, I've got to do something. So this administration, they're committed. When the President, the Vice President, Secretary of State, Ambassador at Large for Religious Freedom, and the Budget Director is committed to advancing religious freedom. It says a lot, and this cannot be lost on people. What would have happened had the election gone another way? I know people have issues with Donald Trump, but let me tell you what. He is keeping his promise when it comes to the issue of defending and advancing religious freedom. It's happening, it's tangible, and persecuted Christians and other religious minorities around the globe, for the first time in a long time, have hope that help is on the way.
Yeah. Right now hope's pretty high for Pastor Andrew Brunson,
yes,
who's imprisoned in Turkey. The Vice President saying yesterday, really, we're ready to impose sanctions on Turkey if you don't free this man. Now, what were your thoughts on that, but also just the administration's take on what they're doing with this?
Well, Jen, I've known the Vice President for over 20 years. In fact, going back to when he was a radio talk show host and I was in office. And
that's a while back, Tony.
It goes back a ways. Let me tell you what, I can't recall a time where I've seen the Vice President more forceful in his comments than yesterday as I was there in the room. And I know that he does not get out ahead of the President. So he was not speaking for himself. He was speaking for the President and for this administration. And it was a clear, unequivocal message to the tyrants in Turkey. Let Pastor Brunson go. And they're not out there on their own. You've got a bipartisan letter from the Senate, 66 senators led by Senator Langford and a Democratic member, I forget which one was leading on that, saying that we're going to push for sanctions. And the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, has some restrictions on the sale of military hardware. That's going to be signed into law probably next week. You've got a measure this week passing a Senate committee that would restrict banking institutions making international loans to Turkey. You've got restrictions being proposed on visas of Turkey officials coming into the country. So there's quite a few sanctions that the Senate has already said we would like to see happen. So the president has a bipartisan backing to take some of these steps.
We could talk to you forever about that, but I want to move on to shadow banning. We've heard about this, the president weighing in, Twitter, Facebook, social media. I mean, it's no shock that conservatives clearly seem to have been censored in some way, shape, or form. But shadow banning is now seems to be part of this. What is your take on the overall concept of what's going on to conservatives, to maybe folks like FRC, or just Christian groups in general? And specifically, there was this one incident apparently with a pastor who was not for Trump, then came out for Trump, and now all of a sudden he's been a bit shadow banned around on the iTunes, and no one can find his podcast supporting Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting what is happening in social media. Of course, this is an ongoing saga of the social media being unveiled for being a part of the opposition party, which is the mainstream media. Look, the public is losing confidence in the media because they are just constant against this president, trying to stop his conservative agenda. And social media has joined that, they've hooked up to that effort and are seen as a part of that. And the shadow banning, you know, where people think their message is getting out there, but they're actually not surprising. I mean, look at what Facebook stock is. I mean, they've taken a nosedive this week. Twitter losing significantly as well. People are tired of this left-wing initiative effort to silence conservatives. And I think that's why you see more and more people coming to, more and more evangelicals in particular, coming to CBN and other outlets that they can trust, who know they're going to tell them the truth.
One story getting a lot of attention right now, Tony, it seems to be leading most of the mainstream media newscasts, is Michael Cohen, the president's former attorney, personal attorney, who is now speaking against the president. What do you make of his comments, and is there a point that you think evangelicals would turn against this president? Is there something Michael Cohen could say? Is there a line that the evangelicals would just say, enough is enough?
I think there is a line in which the evangelical support for the president would begin to turn. And I think that line is, if the president were to engage in behavior that is alleged to have occurred prior to him being president, if that type of behavior were to occur now. The president, look, people knew this president had some skeletons in his closet, okay? Or a warehouse of them. I mean, they knew that there were issues, okay? But they had a choice between Hillary Clinton and him. He made specific promises to, as we talked earlier, religious freedom. He put out 25 names of judicial candidates, making clear the type of judges he would appoint. He has pledged to work to strengthen the economy, help the American worker. Has he kept his promises? Yes, he has. Unlike any politician I've seen at that level, he has kept his promises. Now, does that somehow give him, make evangelicals say we don't care about that behavior? No, they care about it. But they're also tired of the media doing everything they can to dredge up everything they can find to stop this president and to keep him from keeping his political promises. And quite frankly, I think who's being hurt by this more than the president is the media. Conservatives have lost complete confidence in the media, and the polling backs it up. Half the people don't believe the media. They see this as a constant drumbeat against this president. The only two things I see that could cause evangelical conservative support to turn from this president, and it's remained consistent, by the way, is, one, this behavior were to occur now, and two, he were to stop keeping his political promises. One of those two could cause support for this president to begin to diminish. Other than that, I will say this, the mainstream media is not going to be the source that evangelicals and conservatives use to make up their mind about this president. They detest increasingly the mainstream media.
Quick follow-up on the media and the GDP growth that came out today, over 4%, and the media headlines staying away from Fox and some of the other ones, but typically the media headlines are GDP grows by a record 4.1%, and then there's the but.
Right.
And Trump is this horrible.
Look,
it's
this
not Trump.
This president could cure cancer, and they would complain because they're emptying out hospitals. Look, this president gets no credit for what he is doing, except among his base supporters who see through the partisanship and the left-wing commitment of the mainstream media that is trying to stop this president. Because this is significant, okay? This is bigger than the Trump administration. This is about wresting control from the political elite and the cultural elite back to the American people. Mm-hmm. That's what this president has and is doing. That scares, I would say, the devil out of the left, but I'm not sure. It scares them.
Tony Perkins, thank you so much for coming in. It's always great to have you. Get your thoughts on
Good to be with you. Have a great
hot button
weekend.
topics. You too.
Thanks, Tony.